know.
Don't have to start on this.
Oh, you want neither not.
Just before you start, Chris, we've got Maritime New Zealand here as well, but that's your responsibility, isn't it, James? Do you want us just to deal with all the land transport stuff and stuff that's yours, and then
Yeah, well, we've got an hour with me, right?
Frees you up to go.
You got James on his own for half an hour.
We've got him on for half an hour. But yeah, I just wondered whether we want to deal with all the land transport stuff and then go to the maritime.
Well, totally in your hands.
Whatever
so
suits you best.
the division is James does aviation because I'm conflicted, and maritime and a bunch of other random stuff.
Yeah,
so
that's what I thought. So we do the land transport stuff first.
Yeah, fine. Really relaxed.
Okay. Well, welcome everyone. Good to see you all. Lots of familiar faces there. So look, we'll do the usual of handing it over to you to make some introductory remarks, and then 5, 6, 7 minutes or whatever it might be, and then go to questions.
Oh, I won't go for that long. Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's good to be here for my first appearance. Obviously got Associate Minister Meager here. We've got Ruth Fairhall from Acting CE from MOT. We've got Simon Bridges, Chair of NZTA, Brett Glidden, Chief Executive of NZTA, a whole range of cast of thousands from MOT and the various different agencies behind me. So I'll answer all the questions I can't. I think people will be familiar with the GPS and the National Land Transport Plan. In terms of budget 2025, the major transport investments are 461 million for the rail freight network and the completion of the rail network improvement plan, the ARNIP, which is now fully funded for 24 through 27. In particular, budget 25 allocates 143.6 mil for the Auckland and Wellington Metro rail networks, 2 more years of funding to catch up on overdue maintenance and renewals on those very important networks. There's also $219 million for damaged roads as a response to Cyclone Gabrielle in the north east of the North Island. I mean, we can get into it if you'd like, but NZTA is continuing to make progress on the roads of national significance in the GPS, very important projects across the country. And we expect to start work on the Melling Interchange project that latter half of this year, alongside Otaki to North Levin, and both of which are Crown funded projects, which is the old New Zealand Upgrade Program, now changed its name, but those projects will come to market soon. We're making good progress on the Northland Expressway, as well as Watamata Second Harbour Crossing as well, all of which I suspect you want to discuss. So very much in your hands.
Thank you. Right, we'll open up some questions. I'm going to start with Tangi then.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ministers, for your time. The financial planning shows that over a decade, when you take revenue from user charges, from fuel taxes, even those that your government has proposed to hike in a couple of years' time, that will generate about 6 billion, but the costs of road maintenance and existing costs are 12 billion. That leaves your budget with a $6 billion hole. Why are you looking to expand tolling in order to fill or plug that hole on projects like Otaki to North Levin, which was consulted as one thing and now has been rescoped as another?
I think you're confusing a number of different things there. Firstly, I'm not sure of your numbers around the 6 and the 12. The reason we're looking at tolling is it's an additional revenue source to help pay for the roads. So you might be of the view that just once you've built a road, it's built and paid for. It's not. You've got to look after the road, and tolling provides a revenue source to help maintain and look after the road. It adds additional revenue into the NLTP pot. In relation to Otaki to North Levin, the government campaigned on moving towards tolling as a additional revenue source for all new roads that we are planning to build and finance construct over the next few years, for the reasons I've just outlined, and so the tolling decision was made in that context.
In terms of the specific toll for the O2NL project, do you expect NZTA to go and reconsult with the local community as a result of the rescoped project?
Well, the project hasn't been rescoped. That hasn't been finalised. So the NZTA board will make a decision on the final design of the road in due course. They're going through a consultation process around that at the moment, or a community engagement process around that at the moment. So that will go to the board, eventually, whenever it goes to the board for decision making. So that's where that project's at.
In the event that the board determine that it will be a different proposal than what was consulted with the community around a toll, would it be your expectation that reconsultation take place in that circumstance?
No. Ultimately, Otaki to North Levin is a very important project and will deliver a 4-lane expressway standard road from Otaki to Levin, replacing a very dangerous section of state highway and further unlocking growth in the lower North Island. And ultimately the final decisions around the scope and the design will go to the board for approval. But it's a decent chunk of change that's being spent on that project. And by the way, it is significantly more than the 817 million that was allocated back in 2020 when the New Zealand Upgrade Program was done, and the costings were done on the back of a note paper. So it is substantially more than that, than the 817 that it was estimated at. All of those projects in the New Zealand Upgrade Program, which were done by the then government on the back of a note paper to do a political announcement on election year, all of those costings have proven to be out by an order of magnitude of upwards of 100%. They're literally all wrong. And we've had to grapple with that in the same way we've had to grapple with many other problems.
Just one further, so that's okay. I take your point around tolls being a revenue generator for projects, but what is your position on tolling? Because this is a government that has looked to toll a replacement road in Te Ahuaturanga when that was not part of the picture. Now we've got the possibility of a toll going on to a project that has been significantly rescoped that the community are unhappy about. The NZTA have previously said that they are going to refine and change the tolling policy to be much more broader, so it's not specific around the specific road that might be tolled. Do you think that's acceptable to the community?
Well, there's a number of assertions there that I don't accept. I mean, firstly, the idea that it's been significantly rescoped is not accurate, that no decisions have been made on the final scope of it, but what's been publicly speculated about and been engaged with by NZTA delivers a 4-lane expressway standard road of 21.1 kilometres, or whatever the final route is, between Otaki and Levin. And as I say, it's a significant investment in that part of the region. Our position on tolling is laid out in the GPS, which is publicly available, which is that the starting point for all new roads will be that tolling is considered for them when the economics make sense. And we've made decisions in relation to tolling a range of new roads that will open once they're constructed and built.
You had a supplementary on O2NL?
Yeah, like, have you received any advice, or does NZTA have any work done on like what percentage of the cost of a road could be covered by tolling?
Well, it depends on the road.
But do you have any like ballpark figures? Do we think that tolling will be able to raise enough to cover 50% of the capital cost, or?
No, it's not 50%. It depends on the road, depends on the traffic volumes, depends on the size of the toll, depends on the potential diversions that take place as a result of it, which impacts on the traffic numbers. So the answer is it depends. It's not anywhere near 50%. There is a bit of a view out there that tolling is kind of a magic money tree and a panacea, and we can just, all new roads can be funded on the back of tolls. That's not the case. That's not accurate. It is a useful revenue tool to help construct and finance new roads, but they are not a magic money tree that makes roads happen that wouldn't otherwise happen. That's not the case.
So, I mean, in the National Land Transport Program, there's a graph that shows a pretty big gap, as Tony alluded to, between spending expectations and revenue expectations. And I think what I'm hearing you say is that we're not expecting that gap to be significantly filled by tolling as a new revenue source. What revenue source is the government going to use to plug that gap?
Oh, well, we're looking at a range of measures, and you're right to identify that there's a there's a funding challenge into the future when it comes to land transport spending. There's a range of things that we are looking at. Tolling is one of them. Clearly, time of use pricing, congestion charging will have potentially an impact on use of the network. So you've got to factor that in as well. We're also looking at, and I've publicly talked about this, a range of tolling concession arrangements. So we're about to go into the market and explore with the private sector and the market more broadly around whether or not there may be players who want to come in and operate toll roads for the government in exchange for a capital contribution to the Crown. So there's a range of things that we're looking at.
So but congestion charging isn't going to substantially raise revenue.
No, but it will. It changes the way people use the network.
Right, but if it doesn't, the government doesn't alter their spending intentions, it won't help plug the gap.
Well, we live in a dynamic environment. There's future GPSs to come.
Can I just follow up on the funding side of things as a whole? Because there is a big gap. There's a number of different revenue tools which can be used. At the moment, we've got a GPS which has got 3 years of sort of certainty, 10 years of projects, but not all the funding sitting there. We've got the Infrastructure Commission talking about 30 years. Then we've got the issues around asset management. How do all these things align in terms of the ability to deliver in a timely way?
Yes, well, you highlight nicely, Mr. Chair, the challenges when it comes to transport governance and structural funding arrangements. We have a GPS which is done on a 3-yearly basis, which is neatly timed to government cycles and parliamentary cycles. But of course, infrastructure and transport infrastructure is long-lived and 50 to 100 years.
Takes a while to build.
What's that?
It takes a while to build as well.
Takes a while to build as well. In fact, there are projects that are finishing now that started life under the last national government, and the previous government opened projects that started life, many years before. And City Rail Link spans about 3 different governments. So, you're right. And I've publicly talked about this, and I'll just restate it, which is that I don't think the GPS mechanism and the National Land Transport 3-year mechanism is a particularly effective way of doling out transport funding. I think councils, in fact, I'm sure that councils would agree with me, because of course we set the GPS, then the National Land Transport Plan or program follows that. But then of course all the councils have got to do their own council plans, and that feeds into the regional land transport plans. And then, as you know, Mr. Chair, from your own time, all the mayors get together and have a bun fight about the particular projects and have an argument about which ones are being ranked. And that's not sometimes a particularly rational conversation. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Then that feeds into the NZTA. So there's an enormous amount of churn in between all of this consultations that all the councils have to do, that the NZTA has to do, feeding into all of these plans. And then by the time we've actually finalised something and people have actually started to build something, we'll do it all again, like literally 6 months later. So it's really problematic. And we publicly said we want to move towards a 10-year program of, investment. So, work's underway on that. And my intention is that GPS 2027, which we'll have a draft of, towards, next year sometime, we'll move towards that. But you are undoubtedly correct that there are long-term structural challenges around the way in which we plan and fund and finance roads and the broader land transport system. No doubt about that.
So just to finish my question off, does that lead us towards the aspiration of having a long-term infrastructure plan, not just for transport, but across the board?
Yes.
Saying this is how much money we've got, and hopefully some stability about what is to be delivered with that money.
Yeah, next week, you'll see the launch of the National Infrastructure Plan, 30-year plan. It's been developed independently by the Infrastructure Commission. So it's their plan, so I don't want to get ahead of them, but almost certainly the plan will contain some comments around greater stability of funding and a real focus on looking after what we've already got, asset maintenance and some structural changes around that. So I'll that'll be for next week. But many people have talked publicly around the importance of long-term plans, and this sort of feeds into my other portfolios as well. So think about resource management reform. One of the things we're doing there is getting much better, or trying to get much better at long-term spatial planning, for example. So it's something New Zealand hasn't done very well at, but at a regional level, making sure we can look out and say, well, what do we need? What are the kind of corridors we're going to need to look at building in over the next 10, 20, 30 years? Where are the areas that are off limits, and where are the areas that we are going to build, and where are the growth nodes, the supporting infrastructure we need to do that? So that work is coming as a result of spatial planning. through the new Planning Act, which we're developing right now. And then allied to that is just making sure that it's actually possible to go and consent the infrastructure we need. So you'll have seen a couple of weeks ago, we launched the National Policy Statement on Infrastructure, which is designed to send a signal, but also make it clear to councils that implement the RMA that infrastructure is important, including transport infrastructure, and that'll affect the consenting of all of that. And then there's a whole lot of other things we need to do around national standards to lower the cost of future infrastructure as well. So all of that work is underway through my RMA Reform Act.
Cool. Thank you. Was this
Can I go for
primary?
primary?
Primary. Can't remember whether I had you. I'll take Carlos, then Julian, then.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question, as a MP in Auckland, my question to the minister will be focused on City Rail Link. So after both government and Auckland Council has spent almost $1 billion on City Rail Link today, and it's expected to open in 2026, how is this project tracking now? And what action has the government taken to protect this significant investment in our largest city?
Yeah, City Rail Link is a very exciting project. I don't think people realise how transformational it is going to be for Auckland, and it will open next year sometime. I'm not allowed to give you a date because then I'll get the date wrong. So they haven't set a date yet, but it will be next year sometime. Obviously started life all the way back in 2013, 14, started funding by the previous national government. It obviously spans multiple parliaments. And enjoys bipartisan support. So that is actually an example of a project that, in a bipartisan way, people always say there's always chopping and changing, but actually City Rail Link is a project which everyone backed and we just got on.
5 years after we started campaigning. For
Yeah,
it.
well, no.
Just say it.
I'm trying to be.
This has been very collegial so
I'm
far,
trying to be
Julian.
collegial, Jenny.
Let's carry on.
There's many things I can go down, but I'm just going to leave that. So a couple of points I'll make about City Rail Link. The first is I have been incredibly frustrated upon taking over transport, and I was frustrated when I was in housing and resource management as well, at the lack of planning around maximising the development opportunities as a result of it. So we're building this amazing underground metro rail network. Basically, it's going to bring Auckland in the 21st century. Everyone's going to say this is amazing. Basically, my view is we have not done enough over the last few years to get ready for it around the zoning, around the stations. So we started doing some work on that. So last week, you'll have seen the announcement around the second resource management amendment bill, which has just come back from committee, which requires Auckland Council to upzone around 3 particular CRL stations, including Mount Eden and Kingsland. The idea that we have single-storey zoned housing around Kingsland Station is nuts. This is a station in an area that once CRL is opened and fully up and running, significantly reduces travel times between Kingsland and the rest of the network in the CBD. And that will end up changing as a result of the changes we've made. We're giving further consideration to mandating upzoning around some further stations. We may have more to say about that in due course. Second thing that has frustrated me is to really maximise the benefits of CRL, you need to do the level crossings on the network as well. And frankly, there has been negligence in the last few years around being aware of that and doing anything about it. So very, very little planning has gone on, including by the previous government, around the level crossings that are required to be fixed for the network to really be at full effectiveness. So we put $200 million in, earlier this year, alongside the council in relation to getting on with some of them, the highest value projects that have the best benefit cost. But there is over a decade's worth of work, probably longer, in relation to the level crossing work in Auckland in order to make the rail network really effective. Third thing I would say is Mount Eden Station. Again, there's been a real lack of, I would say, particularity and care around that. So Mount Eden Station should provide enormous upside potential for development in Auckland. And that site will, the CRL will open, and that station should be surrounded by commercial, residential, mixed-use development, and it won't, because basically not a lot has happened around it over the last 5-6 years. I find that incredibly frustrating, and I think Aucklanders are going to find it incredibly frustrating as well. I know the mayor of Auckland, Wayne Brown, is also frustrated by that, and he and I are giving some thought right now to what we do around that. Just while I've got the talking stick, I've publicly said that we need to have an honest conversation with Auckland and in Auckland around the view shafts in Auckland, which are important to Auckland to protect the views of the Monga up to a point, but people need to realise that the view shafts come at an economic cost, and it comes at the cost of lost development capacity. I'd refer you to the work done by Jeff Cooper when he was the Auckland Council Chief Economist, who's now at the Infrastructure Commission, who did a study which basically showed that the one view shaft, I think it's the E10 view shaft in Auckland, which protects the view of Mount Eden from the Auckland Harbour Toll Bridge that doesn't exist anymore, has a multi-billion-dollar economic cost. And simply turning the view shaft by, I don't know, a few degrees to the left or the right, I forget which, just a simple tweak doesn't really affect anyone's views, but unlocks hundreds of millions of dollars of economic value, just in planning rules. These are just literally words on a page in our Auckland plan that is costing the Auckland City hundreds of millions of dollars in economic loss. So I've said publicly, and I repeat today, we've got to have a conversation about some of these rules. These are some of the rules that make us poorer than we otherwise need to be as a country and as a city. So we need to fix those. So that's ultimately a decision for Auckland.
Sure. And
I'm encouraging them to do some changes.
So my supplementary is, it's good to hear that the project will be complete in 2026, but is there any decision have been made about the City Railway operation post practical completion, or how will any operational be funded after being complete?
Well, City Rail Link will become part of the Auckland Metro network, and there's a lot of work underway right now around the different timetables and integrating into this work is well underway. The new train timetables, but then also how that integrates into the rest of the bus network, for example, because you obviously want people to be able to get off a train and get onto a bus, and vice versa. So there's a lot of work underway around that, and I'm fairly confident that will be in good order. But look, the reality is, as overseas examples prove, there's always teething problems, and I don't foresee anything different. It's a ginormous change. It will be a ginormous change for the Auckland commuter and rail experience. But the resurgence of commuter rail in Auckland post electrification, from 2009-10 onwards, shows that if you build good quality public transport in Auckland that is reliable and turns up on time and gets people where they want to go quickly and efficiently, Aucklanders will take it. It's actually a really big success story over the last 10, 15, 20 years, the resurgence of public transport in Auckland after the degradation of the 80s and 90s. So, and I think CRL will just further increase that. It's going to be good. Thank you.
So,
Is there any SUPs on this one? Just a
No.
SUP on this? Can I just ask a SUP on this as well, which is just around so you've gone to funding public transport, just how Auckland, but how other parts of the country are responding to the requirement to get a greater proportion of
the private share stuff. Yeah, I might get Brett to come and talk about the private share stuff. So NZTA set some targets through the National Land Transport plan, and there's been a bit of a negotiation and discussion over the last 3 or 4 months or so, probably a bit longer than that actually, around where that's got to. But
yeah, so we went out with some targets as required under the GPS to look at increasing private share. And in doing so, we went and consulted with the PTAs, my piece of paper, and they gave us some quite strong feedback about those targets and their ability to hit those targets. In doing so, we took that feedback on and we have adjusted a number of the targets to more align with the realistic expectations of what the PTA could achieve over the 3 years, and have then now reset those targets. The bulk of the PTAs now have already actioned and are underway with addressing and meeting those targets over the 3-year period, and are pretty confident that they'll be able to get pretty close to those targets during that period. So just to give a sense, at a national level, in 18-19, private share over at a rolled up level was 33%. In 23-24, it had dropped down to 22%, and the target for 24-25 is now 25%. So we've softened the original position that we took to more realistic targets, and the PTAs are now focused on those.
So what was the original target total?
The original target was 27%, so we've just brought that back slightly. Although it's not done at a national level, it's actually done by PTA, so I'm giving you a rolled up summary.
It varies by
PTA.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Julianne, primary.
So I have a series of questions about the roads of national significance.
Sure.
I mean, I think all of us here would expect, and the minister would agree, that decisions about investment should be transparent, fair, follow a robust process, be on sound advice, and support value for money. How is NZTA able to prioritize the different roads of national significance projects when there's no like information on the cost and the benefits of those projects?
Well, there is benefit, there is information about the.
Can
costs
you
and benefits
provide
of the
a
program.
list then to the committee of the cost of each of those projects and the most recent benefits? Because I've asked multiple times and I keep getting answers, including WAs, that we don't have that information.
Next.
Well, some of those costs and the benefits have been released publicly. So just in the last 3 or 4 months, I've released a whole series of investment cases, or at least slide deck investment cases of many of the projects which contain high level estimates of costs and benefit costs and various different things. Some of that stuff is available publicly.
Is the prioritization of the projects based on then this information? And is there like is that set out clearly somewhere how the board is prioritizing which
Well,
projects go
I'll
first?
get maybe the chair or Brett to answer that around prioritisation and stuff.
I think at the end, when it comes to this, Minister is right. There are BCRs that come through the investment cases. I mean, I think at a level, it goes to the question that I think both you and the chair asked around, in the end, overall, not on this NLTP period, but the next one, and beyond, the funding gap, and questions of prioritisation and staging and the like. And so the NZTA board is at the back end of this year looking to be through the investment cases of all of the roads of national significance. And look, at that point, I think we'd be looking to release the finalised benefit cost ratios on those projects. And it says there's no point doing it early while they're still not final, still working through these things. And indeed, in some cases, we haven't done that yet.
Not all of them have been done.
Okay, so not all of them are done.
Not all of them are done. Some of them have been
Right.
done. I mean, isn't it
So,
true?
but there's clearly some prioritization already happening without knowing the
No,
full
well, it's
extent.
like, I mean, it's an iterative process, right? So if you just go back a couple of years, government changed. We obviously campaigned coming into government on prioritising a range of projects as roads of national significance around the country. Some of the projects that have become RONs were actually Crown funded by the previous government, so it's quite a complicated funding picture, but we campaigned on a bunch, put that into the GPS and the NLTP. Frankly, I think it'd be fair to say not a lot of action happened in the 6 years between 17 and 23 on 4-lane roads. So, Manawatu, goes back to April 2017, but there's one road consented, which is Warkworth to Wellsford. Not a lot of work was done on consenting of everything else. In fact, the tap was turned off for consenting. There's a whole bunch of projects that just basically got cancelled between 2018 and 2020, including Melling and Tony de Granada and a bunch of other projects. So not a lot of the kind of pre-work that normally gets done by the Transport Agency was done during that period. And there are reasons for that. We've come in made it clear that expressway roads are back, and the Transport Agency has spent quite a lot of time over the last 18 months or so getting on with the job of building up the investment cases and all the work that's required in order to get on with that. And the various different ones are at different stages, right? So, you know, we've released the board has approved the Mill Road Stage 1, for example, which I released the other day. There's the first stages of the State Highway 29 outside Tauranga. You know, the first stages of that, the investment case has been approved, not the funding for the construction, but some of the pre-work. Likewise, to not use the roading example, Northwest Rapid Transit Stage 1 investment case has been approved. I've released the BCR if that's got a benefit cost ratio of 6, which is obviously very, very high. So some of that stuff is public, but it's an iterative process, and the board and the agency are not through all of those. They haven't done all the work on all those roads yet.
Can I just ask some questions about scope?
Yeah.
Is the agency able to consider scope of these projects to achieve best value for money? Like, say, where there's lower traffic volumes, something like a 2+1 road,
Yeah.
Are they able to consider that with the
Yes, the answer is yeah. And in terms of, and I think you can ask about speed as well, because that goes to standard that you built to, and the answer is yes as well.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
they're looking at that.
will the Mount Vic Tunnel have new provision for walking and cycling in the scope?
I don't know. I have to ask Brett that.
I actually haven't looked at the update. That's one still in the planning phase. I don't know off the
I
top of
don't
my
think
head.
we're, I don't think we're at that stage.
So because, I mean, you did campaign on a new walking and cycling tunnel as part of that project, according to the GPS.
I think you're hearing us that we're not at that stage to get an answer. So,
The
yeah.
the GPS
Yeah, I've got
doesn't
something, but you've got to finish.
allow for walking and cycling facilities to be funded from the state highway activity class. And if there were to be new walking and cycling facilities part of that project, it would probably take up more than what's entirely available. for walking.
It's in design now, so I don't want to get ahead of where the team have got to on that. So I don't know is the short answer.
Okay.
Okay, I've got SUPs from Cam.
Thinking of
Tracy,
the other
Carl.
corner of the Golden Triangle.
But the cycle away from Tony to Narong is almost done.
You want
Thinking about the other corner of the Golden Triangle,
Very
you've got
expensive
Tauranga.
seawall.
Minister, you've got Tauranga with State Highway 29.
Yep.
The Pioneer roundabout, the State Highway 29, State 1, and even connecting through to Cambridge.
Yep.
How much of the cost benefit that's being taken into account involves unlocking the extra housing that this area needs?
Yeah, so that feeds into the investment cases, obviously. In particular, in relation to State Highway 29, there's a huge potential greenfield housing opportunity. You know, outside Tauranga there. If you just throw forward the next, 15, 20, 30 years, there's going to be a huge area of growth. It's just sort of obvious that that's where some of the growth is going to be from a greenfield housing point of view. And that new 4-lane road, or a new 4-lane road progressively built over time out there, is going to unlock a lot of that. And you've got major developers and players out there now. One of the things that I'm doing with my housing and RM hat on is we're changing the law to allow the Transport Agency to essentially do a form of development contribution or development levy in order to help fund some of these roads. Because I just take a simple view that if we're going to turn up from the Crown and build an expensive new 4-lane road, which unlocks land value for people and unlocks housing or commercial development opportunities, then the people who are the beneficiaries of that public expenditure should help pay for that public expenditure. The law doesn't really allow us to do that at the moment. So this is with my housing hat on, but we are changing the law to allow infrastructure funding and financing contributions to NZTA to use that act in order to help fund some of those projects. So it goes also partly back to the revenue question that Andy, the chair, mentioned before around potential revenue sources. Now, I'm not pretending for a moment that's going to fund everything, but it's every bit counts, and sometimes the potential value uplift or cost recovery, as we prefer to call it, is quite substantial, or can be quite substantial.
I think you've talked about that with some of the other projects previous in this session. But what about Takatimu Northern Link also?
Yeah.
To ask about. How much further can the people of Tauranga expect that 4-lane road to development to continue?
So stage 1 is underway right now. In fact, it's literally halfway built. In fact, I was up there the other day. It's a pretty impressive road. It's taken a while, but would have been helpful if it wasn't canned back in 2017. But anyway, underway we are. And stage 2 is in the planning stages now.
Takes us to Omokara,
Takes you to Omokara,
the grade separated interchange.
grade separated
And
interchange.
is there a date sort of planning on that? Do we have any indications that the people of the Western Bay Plenty have something to plan their lives around?
Yeah, so that one is obviously going through the investment case. It's got consenting, and we'll use the fast track consenting. It has some Māori owned land, which makes it slightly more complicated, which we're in negotiation with at the moment, and we've got property purchase to go. So consenting property, that's the next phase.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. Tracy, you had a supplementary. as well.
Yeah, I did. And my supplementary was largely related to the previous question, but it's relatively universal and probably can be summed up by saying, let's head south.
Sure.
Let's head south.
I see the localism all over the
And I'm kind of interested in where you're thinking, what advice you've received or what the plan is essentially for the South Island. Many people in the South Island feel a little bit left out by some of the transport funding and decision-making that's been made. You said earlier, if you build quality public transport, certainly the people in Auckland will use it. So I want to ask some questions around Christchurch as well.
Yeah.
But happy for you to kick off with a general understanding of what the transport opportunities in the south are
Well,
and why they don't appear in this budget.
There's plenty of money in the NLTP in the south. I mean, Minister Meagher, I'm sure would
Do we want the
mention
Minister of the South Island to come up?
with the Ashburton Bridge.
More the decision makers probably.
The second Ashburton Bridge. But we're obviously funded the Brougham Street.
Which was already funded.
Well, sort of. Anyway, the Brougham Street will be underway later in the year. The Hope Bypass in Nelson is underway and planning. There's a lot to be done in Queenstown as well. We've got significant growth challenges down in Queenstown, obviously. In relation to public transport in Christchurch, you'll be familiar with the PT Futures program, which there's a bit of back and forward between Transport Agency and City Council in relation to that on ECAN. A year or so ago, Brett, TA will be able to give you an update as to relation to that. But City Council's taken that, the Regional Council's taken that in-house.
Yeah, so the Mass Rapid Transit is progressing, funding that themselves and progressing the detailed business case. The rapid bus improvements isn't proceeding at this stage.
Yeah.
There does seem to be, there did seem to be some confusion. I accept the fact that that was genuine confusion from various parties, but that $78 million of PT Futures money disappeared.
Yeah.
There was even media about expressing the nature of the confusion before you were Minister of Transport. But it does seem like something the government could have clarified before the money was essentially lost and diverted back to a previously funded.
My understanding is that they offered that up themselves. Is that?
Yeah, that was where the confusion lay. It hadn't been drawn down at that point. It was still Crown.
It certainly wasn't their understanding.
And then it got reallocated.
I think there's, it was sort of contemporaneous with me taking over the portfolio. So it's difficult for me to speak to exactly where it all got to, but
Are you open to revisiting the public transport needs of Christchurch then?
Yeah, and I've said publicly, and I've said to the mayors and the regional council down there, I'm interested in exploring, better PT for Christchurch and Canterbury. Absolutely, and there's money available to do work on that, including by them and by us. And if you think about Christchurch, buses are a really good part of the public transport system in Christchurch now, and there's potential for more. So, absolutely.
Okay, we're going to go to
Supplementary,
You had a supplementary, okay, supplementary, and then I'll go.
Since we're talking about cost and benefit, can the minister highlight the committee, the impact of this role of national significant program to have to support the increasing New Zealand economic growth?
Yeah, well, I think at a broad level, what we're trying to do across the multi-year program of investment through the RONs is support freight and productivity but also housing growth and commercial development opportunities. So depends exactly where you're talking about. Every project's a little bit different, but we talk about State Highway 29 supporting housing and industrial growth out through Tauranga. Obviously, the Northland Expressway Road of National Significance is going to be a key economic enabler over time for Northland. The Northland's great challenge is that it's essentially closed off from Auckland by transport links that are frankly suboptimal. And because of the resilience challenges on that section of State Highway, it's closed, many days a year. And so I think the people of Northland have sent a very clear signal that one of the best things we can do to unlock the economic potential of the North, which is the poorest part of New Zealand, connected to, or not connected enough to one of the wealthiest parts of New Zealand. And over time, we will do for Northland what the Waikato Expressway did for Waikato. I just don't think anyone would doubt that the economic growth that has been unlocked by the Waikato Expressway between Hamilton and surrounds and Auckland has been huge for both regions. And that's what high quality transport roading infrastructure can do, and that's what we're very focused on.
Can I just ask a
No,
supplement?
hang on, don't just jump in and finish, Alice.
That's probably the second part of my question. Like, how does project impact the people in Auckland?
How does what, sorry?
How does project impact the people in Auckland?
Oh, the project, the people of Auckland. Well, ultimately, it's about making freight go from A to B quicker, lowering the cost of goods delivery, increasing jobs and growth, and that's ultimately what this government's all about.
Why do you, can I just ask a sec?
Julianne, not everybody's quite on board with these projects, as you would understand.
No, can I just ask a question about what's been said?
Go on.
Yeah, why do you think it is that there's no evidence in regional GDP that shows that an overall benefit from those regions that have had roads of national significance built versus other parts of New Zealand? Like, if you look at the regional GDP over time, there's absolutely no evidence of a difference from the Waikato Expressway.
We'll consider the counterfactual. Would Waikato be poorer without the expressway?
I mean, you literally have no evidence to claim that it's been a benefit and that it would be
Well,
poor.
all right.
So, I mean, like, if you look at regional GDP, it's basically the same in areas that have had investment in roads and areas that haven't. So, like, it's other factors that are influencing GDP,
Well, we
not
just-
a four-lane road.
Well, okay,
So,
well, just consider, as I say, just if you didn't let me finish, just consider the counterfactual. If we still had the dirt track between Auckland and Hamilton, do you think Waikato would be as wealthy as it is now?
well, we could also consider whether we'd invested in better rail connections between Waikato and Auckland, and whether that would have had a bigger impact on regional GDP and housing.
Yeah, and you can do that thought experiment.
So
I'm not
I'm just like,
intending to.
would it be useful if we're spending like, the huge sums of money, like $30 billion on transport infrastructure, that we actually ensured that there was some assurance that it was the best investment to achieve the outcomes you want?
Yeah, I mean, you can do the thought experiment about, rail versus roads between Hamilton and Auckland. I'm not intending to. And you can campaign on ripping up the Waikato Expressway too. I'm not intending on doing that. So.
Well, that's a
Okay,
straw man
I think we're
argument,
done with
because I
that
haven't campaigned
particular
on it. I'm just
discussion.
saying there's
Julianne.
actually no evidence to support.
Julianne,
But
What
you're
you're
entitled to your view, but I'd ask you to consider the counterfactual.
I don't think there's much point in having a to and fro because you're
Or
not going to
consider
agree.
Auckland without the Waterview Tunnel.
I mean,
Dan,
thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd suggest that anybody who travels that road, ask them whether they see it beneficial, and I'm sure they would say yes. But anyway, thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister, I know you're a big fan of electric vehicles, and national campaigned on rolling out, electric vehicle charging stations. And I'm just keen to get a sense from you around how that is tracking, 10,000, I believe.
Yes, that's right, by 2030.
Yeah, so
It's a stretch goal.
that's a stretch goal, and maybe it does impact the South Island, but just wondering if you can give us an update.
Yeah.
What's,
I think.
how do you and your team go about prioritising? Where do you start from first, and how's that tracking?
Yeah, so we're at 1368 charge points across the country now. So we've got a bit of work to do to hit the 10,000 by 2030. We've adopted a UFB style co-investment approach to roll out public EV charging infrastructure. So basically the way we've been doing it up until now is ECA's been given, chunks of money every 2 or 3 years, and they've been doing these grants out into the market. It hasn't been particularly commercial, to be honest. It's just been kind of doling out the money tree, and people have been taking the money and building. We've taken the money off ECA, we've given it to NIFCO, which is the old Crown Infrastructure Partners, which is the old group who did the UFB in the first place. And so they'll be running a commercial procurement process in order to but basically partner with private sector partners to roll it out. I think I'm right in saying they're about to hit, RFP's about to hit the markets like literally next week or something. Well, it's out. Oh, there you go. Sorry, it's out now. There you go. Did not know that, but there you go. So it's just gone out now. And as part of that, we're doing a cost benefit analysis. So we'll be stumping up with concessionary loans. So the grant funding is essentially becoming a concessionary loan, so a lower rate of interest, and we'll be partnering with groups like ChargeNet and other potential providers. I shouldn't say ChargeNet actually, because it's a contestable process, but people know them well.
Yeah.
And the aim is to basically use the existing grant money in a much more commercial way to get better value for money. And we have some of the lowest number of public charges in the OECD, and it is a barrier towards uptake of electric vehicles. We know that range anxiety is a real thing. It is a barrier, it is a psychological barrier in people buying an EV because they think they're going to run out. And obviously we've got a big country, and people do intercity movements and things like that. So I think it'll be good. Before you ask me the next question, which is the money that's currently appropriated enough? The answer is no. So it's a starting point, and obviously future investment will be subject to future budget decisions. But I think we've got the model right, and it's taken a little bit longer than I would like to get to this point, but we are where we are, and wait and see what the RFP produces. And I'm relatively bullish about it. I think EVs have got a big future in New Zealand, and I'm a driver myself, so have been for 10 years now.
Awesome, thank you.
7 years.
And a follow-up question to that is, in terms of deciding where to prioritise, is that a commercially driven decision? Is it demand driven? What are the factors that you guys consider?
It's fundamentally commercial, but I'll just get just to talk about the criteria for how we're doing it. It's been done at an operational level.
Thank you. So it has been done on a commercial level. So each application that comes in will be assessed for its overall costs and benefits and its ability to achieve commerciality over time. There are no specific requirements about where in the country it should go, but really focusing on individual applications and the costs and benefits of each.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Sorry, can I just for the record just get you to identify yourself too?
Siobhan Routledge from the Ministry
Thanks,
of
Siobhan.
Transport.
Thank you. Sorry, very much appreciate it.
Thanks very
Right,
much.
Okay.
Cheers.
Right, Tangi, you had a primary.
Thank you. Minister, you've previously said that Motu Move, the national ticketing service, is on track to deliver an integrated and productive part of public transport system. There's nothing in budget in terms of to address some of the concerns that have recently arisen. What is going on there in terms of the delay to deliver actually on that?
Yeah, well, good question. It doesn't need any more budget money. What it needs is strong governance and focus in making sure that we deliver on it. I'm pretty frustrated by it, and I am worried about it. So I had the governance group in my office 10 days or so ago and made it really clear to them that it is a government priority to get the project back on track. It is not on track at the moment. They are doing an external review of the project so far. That is underway right now. And they are going to deliver a plan to the government in July, I think. Yep. August, July, end of July. And I will receive that and consider it, and no options are off the table in terms of anything we need to do to bring the project back on track. It has suffered repeated delays, as you know. This project actually goes all the way back to arguably 2009-10. So it spans multiple years. Part of the challenge, frankly, is the public transport authority's insistence on every single concession in every single regional council being integrated into the new system. So it is a challenging project in the sense that you're trying to build something for the entire country, and every regional council has their own concessions, like, you know, off-peak, gold card, even the gold card off-peak concessions vary around the country. There are really niche, bespoke concession arrangements in some PTAs, some public transport authorities, all of which has to be built into the system. All of that raises cost and time. And the other problem is the governance group, the way it's structured is, you know, like unless everyone agrees, nothing moves forward. So that has presented some challenges as well. So I'm pretty frustrated by it. I made that really clear to the governance group. And so, as I say, they're delivering me a plan. Nothing is off the table in terms of actions that we will need to take as a government to make it a reality, because at the end of the day, we're paying for it. So the government is paying for it.
And in terms of nothing is off the table, is one of those options additional appropriation? Or is it not actually appropriation that's
It's not
required?
appropriation that's the problem. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but Brett be able to talk from TA. It's all funded out of the NZTA.
Funded out of the NZTA.
Yeah, it's not an appropriation issue. It's a technology issue. It's a governance issue. It's a delivery issue. It's not an appropriation issue. It's plenty of money there.
And I mean, the financial commitment over the lifespan of this project is quite significant.
Yep.
How do you intend to, post-July, sort of keep the public informed of progress around what the next steps are going to be?
Yeah, well, once I've considered the plan from the governance group, I'll be making public announcements around that. I'm conscious of the need. I mean, there's obviously there's overall stakeholders of everyone in New Zealand who uses public transport, but you know, we're dealing with regional councils who are looking at, you know, have got systems, their own public transport systems now that are end of life, and very conscious about that. So I'll be making public announcements once we've considered it.
Okay, and just one other question in the area of public transport is just confirmation that the government is still committed to what was provided initially in budget 23 and then confirmed last year, moving forward for the Lower North Island Rail Integrated Mobility Program in its current form?
Yes, we're just working through the finer details of it.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just ask one question in the public transport space? It's one of the things that I hear from quite a number of the TAs around the country as I talk with them, is that some of them would quite like it where they are, if you like, a city-only arrangement. All the buses, all the public transport is within a city, that perhaps some of them might be better able to run those services than their regional councils, but often they're not allowed to at the moment. Have you got any views on that?
Yep, I've got many views on regional councils.
Entertain us.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, I think there's regional councils have got a whole range of different functions, and as you'd be aware, in the context of RM, of resource management reform, and some of the wider changes around spatial planning through resource management, but also city and regional deals, which is a government priority as well. You know, there's an open question around the role of regional councils, what they do and how they do it. That's all I'll say.
That will do me. Thank you. Primary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Heading north now to Auckland. Minister, you mentioned the Waitemata Second Harbour crossing. Nothing kind of brings up more anxiety for most North Shore people because of how often it's closed or traffic congestion. What's the update in terms of, you know, will we see it before I go grey?
Well, depends how stressed you are.
Yeah, exactly.
I think I'll just repeat what I sort of said publicly before, which is that successive transport ministers have got very bullish and excited about the Second Harbour crossing and have made various different commitments around types of routes and what it would be built. And, you know, before the 23 election, we had, you know, various different commitments and all that sort of stuff. This is, you know, for any government, regardless of who's in charge, it'll be one of the biggest commitments they ever make. And so you've got to get it right. And so I said, let's do the work. let's get the decision right, and then let's try and get some consensus around what it is, because whatever the government of the day might make the decision, but governments come and go, and the next few governments have to oversee it and implement it. So I want some consensus, if possible, in the Parliament around that. So we'll act in good faith and in the national interest around that. From a process point of view, NZTA's had a barge in the harbour doing geotech work. I don't know if anyone wants to, you might know about it. You speak to the geotech work. Yep.
Yeah, so we've continued the investigation. We're trying to do without regret investigation. So for the first time, we've started to do real geotech testing in the harbour, both where a potential bridge could go and where a tunnel could go.
Is that the yellow thing?
That's the yellow thing that's working its way backwards and forwards across the harbour. We're also doing quite a bit of work on what I'd call a specimen design for potentially a bridge or a tunnel option to get a better understanding of the buildability and construction challenges of it. So we get a better understanding of the funding profile that would be needed, and also the wider network impacts. We've also done a short piece of market sounding across Australasia just to understand the risk profile that potential builders would look at, what funding and financing options they might look at, when they would like to get involved, when they wouldn't, just to test the market on how they would think about a project like this and how they would go about developing it. This all leads up to giving the government better information to make an informed decision.
Exciting.
We would end up tolling it. It was inevitable that we end up being told.
Yeah.
But it's one of the areas where tolling revenue potentially does help fund capital contributions, because the vehicle volumes are so large. So, you know, if you, depending on how you construct it and what you do, and, you know, there's obviously a lot of moving parts to it, but the traffic volumes are so large that tolling is something that can help, you know, help pay for a substantial sum of the money required to build it.
Do you,
Don't just jump in.
Yeah.
No, I'm happy to answer.
No, well, I'll let Dan finish the question and then.
Tolling one part, you know, we had the investment summit, and, you know, was there any sense of international investor sentiment towards potentially investing in projects?
Yeah, there's big interest. There's big interest because there's obviously nation shaping and, you know, substantial, be the biggest infrastructure project ever built in New Zealand history.
Yeah.
So there's obviously huge interest. And so NZTA is doing the market stuff now, and it has been doing that, and obviously got the barge. And so we're just working our way through it. But I don't want people to sort of think that we're going to go charge off and announce in the next 6 months that we're doing this and we've made the decision. It's that this is huge for New Zealand, and it's important to get it right.
Awesome. Thanks.
Julianne?
like, are the vehicle volumes that you're looking at, is that taking into account congestion pricing?
Well, that would be part of the investment case for, yeah, I mean, that would be part of the investment case as they work it through.
Right, okay.
Yeah, but just a simple metric of, like, look at the volumes over the Harbour Bridge now.
Yeah, but if you were paying directly for it, then the volumes would be lower.
Yeah, yeah, so there's obviously an interaction between, depending on how you set up a congestion charge scheme as well. So there's a lot of moving parts.
I was just wondering because there've been a lot of like proposals for public-private, well, there were projects in Australia that were public-private partnerships that were meant to be funded from tolling, and then the volumes never eventuated.
Yeah, so whether a consortium take tolling risk or not, that's some of the things we're testing the market on, but it's a bit early to make those final calls.
But all those things are for the future. But there's commercial negotiations around all that stuff. You've got to get the model right.
Just to give us, and obviously we haven't even got an idea of a project yet, and it's obviously investigative stage, but just, you know, you said the biggest project that New Zealand's ever done. I can imagine it's probably almost order of magnitude, but can you give us a rough idea of the kind of number that we could be talking about?
No, I don't want to do that because I try and steer clear of that stuff, because if I say, you know, a certain number,
well, I was
and in
looking
5
for
years'
a
time when we
range.
decide to do it and it's twice as big, I'll get told I'm wrong. Or if it's smaller than that. So I sort of, and also I've got no idea, right? Like, so the last thing the New Zealand public need is me, who's not an engineer, you know, who's got no idea about the actual numbers, turning up and just pulling a number out of thin air. That would be irresponsible. So I'm not going to give you a number. No, but the reality is, it's a truckload of dough, right? Like it's whether it's a bridge or a tunnel, it's a lot of money, and it's important we get it right. And you know, like, I couldn't believe it when Brett said to me, like, we've never really done geotech work before. It's sort of like, what are the last what have people been doing?
Yeah.
Like, what have we
have they
not
been
gone and
spending
actually
money?
had a look in the harbour and worked out what's actually deliverable? So anyway, we're doing that work and it's cost a bit of money. I don't know how much it's cost.
I don't know off the top of my head, nothing in the scheme of the big.
Nothing in the grand scheme. of
Getting the
things.
number right for the project.
But you know, like that'll tell us what's deliverable and what's not. And it'll give us a lot more information around bridge v tunnel, which is the great debate, right? And then the next question is where it goes and all that stuff.
Can I just
Yeah,
ask
go.
another question? I mean, I just think it's interesting because Auckland, you know, does have other roads that to get around
It's
from
an
the north to the south.
additional Waimata Harbour crossing.
Yeah. I mean, do you think that project is more like enabling more cars to go between the North Shore and the city centre of Auckland is more important than the connection between the North and South Island in terms of resilience and economic productivity and growth?
Well, I think, they're both important, right? I mean,
But I guess
Yeah, I mean, they're
the
both
sum of
important.
money that was, you know, sort of promised around the additional Waitemata Harbour crossing is, you know, was somewhere in the range of 20 billion. And we were told a few billion for long-term 100-year port infrastructure at 3 billion was too expensive to keep, to be, you know, to
we're
be sure
talking
we
about
had
IREX.
connection. Talking about IREX, yeah.
Well, we are buying new ferries for the North Island, South Island connection. The issue with IREX was never the fact that we needed ferries. That was not the issue. The issue was what started life as a $750 million ferry project became a $4 billion monstrosity because no one figured out that you could buy the ferries, but you needed to berth them in upgraded ports. And then no one had even taken account of the local roading improvements that were required each year.
Yeah.
Like it was just a disaster from start to finish. Like even Grant Robertson blanched at spending the money. He's the one who actually kind of vaguely put on it back in mid-20, because just read that the timeline's publicly available. It's literally a train wreck from start to finish. And we've had to grapple with the previous government's complete mismanagement of the project.
Well, I'm
There's
just,
gateway review after gateway review with red flags saying, this is not going off track, and no one did anything about it. Just kept shoveling money at it. So
yeah,
we've had
I
to
just
grapple
think it's
with it.
interesting that 3 billion is considered unaffordable for like a strategic connection between the North and South Island, which is absolutely necessary for freight and vehicles and people to move between the two islands. But, you know, it's a tiny fraction of what we're talking about for an additional Waitemata Harbour crossing.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, but you're dealing with different, you're comparing apples and oranges, right?
Yeah.
You know, so you're comparing different things, and it's not so much this. I mean, it is partly the size in relation to North and South Island thing, but it's the major thing that got people worked up is the budget blowouts. You know, because the money just kept growing and growing and growing. You know,
So if-
but there could have been more.
If we'd started with the expectation that it was going to be 4 billion, it would have been no problem.
Well, no, I'm not saying that. But anyway, Mr. Peters and the
We've got that later on.
ferry car on that. Are they coming in?
Yes, we've got rail coming.
Oh, there you go.
later on,
We
yeah.
can get into it.
So you can ask those
Yeah.
questions then.
But you know, we're making really good progress there.
I think we've got to time. If you're
Oh,
willing
I
to
got
stay,
it.
that's great, but I think we've got to move on to.
Got to move on to
aviation
Minister
and,
Meager.
Wait, can I just ask, because I want to be sure about the Chatham Islands shipping solution?
That's me.
That's you.
That's-
Okay.
that's
Yeah,
James.
we're going maritime and aviation.
Even though it's part of your electorate, it is in fact
Yes.
in the South Island. It is part of.
It's a very eastern island.
Yeah, it's my, that's fine. As the MP for the Chatham Islands.
Yeah, no,
I have to ask
it's very
about-
important. Have you been?
So
there?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
thanks.
go a couple times a year.
Thanks,
Do
Minister.
you? Thank
Yeah,
you.
Auckland too.
Okay,
Thanks, Tony.
thank you. We'll allow a moment for people, some of whom we'll see back again later on.
Keep the mark.
Got everybody you need there?
Yeah, I'll get, good stay. Let's get Keith and Mark.
All yours, sorry.
I'll just wait for Keith and Mark to come in.
Okay, right,
From
okay.
CAA.
Right, okay.
Yeah, come up. I'll get Keith up as well. Keith, do you want to jump on?
So you just want to juggle between maritime
Yeah, I'm
and
happy to.
aviation at the same, yeah. We'll probably let the questions flow whichever way they have to go, but in your hands to a few moments. And congratulations again on the new role.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. It's a bit weird being on this end of the table. It's quite far away down the other end, but I feel very safe. Look, thank you for the invitation to appear today, ostensibly to cover off some of the aviation aspects of transport, but as mentioned at the top previously, I do have responsibility for maritime, search and rescue, Chatham Islands, replacement vessel, and a number of other issues under those delegations. So happy to cover any of those as we go through. On my left, I've got Keith Manch, Director, Civil Aviation Authority, and on my right, Mark Darrow, who's the Chair of Civil Aviation. And in the room, I think we've got various ministry officials and Kirsty Hewlett from Maritime New Zealand as well to help out. Look, I know we don't have much time.
Because I think we'll probably need to juggle between aviation and maritime, so.
Well, you might serve that for your inquiry at some point as well.
Certainly will.
I know we don't have much time, so I won't spend a lot of it with opening comments, but just generally wanted to say that, the government's focused on growing our economy, and aviation and maritime are a key part of that. In terms of aviation, we know that, it's a big contributor to tourism. Tourism is worth about $12 billion to the economy, our second largest export. So a strong aviation sector is vital for a strong tourism sector as well. We also know that the maritime sector, in terms of our ports and our productivity and security of ports, is vital to getting our goods and exports overseas. About 99% of our goods by volume leave through our ports, and about 80% of goods by value leave through our ports as well. So having a strong, robust, resilient maritime sector is also very, very important. And just finally, to touch on one of the key issues in the room, I have responsibility for procurement of the Chatham Islands replacement vessel, and I can report to the committee that that is going very well, and that we should be in a position to make some further updates on that in a few weeks' time, but happy to take questions on that and any of those other topics as we go.
Brilliant. Thank you. Right. Got a first
Yes,
primary
thank you,
over here
Mr.
and
Chair.
then-
Thank you, Minister. Look, mine's on aviation, and just prior to budget 2025, you're on the record as saying that regional flight reliability and connectivity was your top priority. How can you be taken seriously where there has been nothing to address the concerns that have been raised from regional New Zealand in terms of addressing the fares that they are paying to travel to or from regional New Zealand?
Well, first of all, to say that nothing is being done very much understates what we are doing in that space. So you're correct, it is my number one priority in the aviation space. As a regional rural MP, connectivity to the rest of the country is vitally important. When I came into Parliament, the cancellation rates from my local airport at Timaru, which does 4 flights a day, 2 up, 2 down to Wellington, was sitting around about 12 or 11, 12%. And the national average sits around about 4 or 5%. Now, as a regional and rural MP, I don't think any of us should accept those rates. Now, there are reasons for that. There's weather, there's accessibility to engineering and parts and planes being grounded and all that kind of stuff. But fundamentally, connectivity to the regions is vitally important to growing those regions. And so as an initial step, one of the first things we did was improve the reporting on that flight reliability. So you would have seen in the May report, that actually it was released in May, but for the April on-time performance data, for the first time we now have statistics about regional reliability to the regions. And there's someone who probably flies in and out of Palmerston North quite a lot, would be very interested in the on-time performance for those regions. Ministers are also in discussions around what we can do to support airport infrastructure. You've seen some announcements around that recently, including in Hokitika, with about $8 or $9 million to upgrade the runway there as well. And there are a number of other improvements we can make in that sector. And yes, we hear the calls from regional airlines about how they are struggling. Aviation is not an easy industry to be in. They are still feeling the hangover of COVID, and there is space there for the government to provide some support, and it is something we are actively considering at the moment.
Just on that, Minister, where in the budget is there provision to address that connectivity in terms of airfare comparisons travelling in and out of the region?
So you're talking about
anything in there?
Airfare price reporting?
Yes.
So one of the complications about this sector is that it is essentially a user pays sector. So most of the money, if not all of the money, if I'm understanding Mark and Keith's fashion, is based on levies raised by the authority. So essentially it is those levies that pay for the functioning of the regulatory system. The ministry has a responsibility as a monitor or a regulator of the sector as well. So in budget 25, there is no funding for airline reporting, but I have written to airlines to seek their views on providing data around the airfares in the same way they provide data around their on-time performance. I know in Australia it is a requirement, and I think in the sector it's a point-in-time provision of that data. There's also a number of third-party monitors who monitor airfares. So I'm looking at options in that space. It's what the Crown can do in order to perhaps purchase that data or require airlines to provide that data. One thing I'm very focused and wary of is at a time where there is a lot of pressure in the airline sector, not putting more costs and more pressure on airlines who are doing it tough. So we've already asked them to provide performance data, which they've been happy to provide without having to regulate them for that. If we were to go out and then start requiring them to provide us with airfare reporting, which is accessible by third party already, that could put additional costs on those airlines, which would add to the airfares that consumers face. So I'm very wary of the government not putting unnecessary costs on the sector as well.
Okay, no funding, thank you. Just one further, but it's around the aviation security screening improvements or rollout. In terms of regional airports, can we expect to see any movement in that space in terms of increased screening, security screening in regional airports? I know not all airports have the infrastructural capacity at the moment to do that, but is that something that is on your radar and something that you're looking at for the future?
No.
Okay, thanks.
Can I just ask one question in that area as a sub, and that's just in terms of you may or may not have any information on the profitability of routes because obviously it's commercially sensitive, but the impression I get is that we do have a number of routes which are not profitable for airlines and yet they are still running them, which is in a sense of public service. Would that be fair?
You're right, I don't have access to that data, but I would imagine that not every single route that is flown around the country is profitable. In the same way that any large business may run, let's say, lines of food products which are loss leaders and aren't profitable, but they provide it because they do so in order to maintain market share or to maintain goodwill in the community. So it's probably a fair assessment to say it's probably something that's better directed to our larger airlines. I know that
They won't tell us anyway. So
well, and look, that's their prerogative as commercially sensitive information. But I mean, it is very difficult to fly an air route where there isn't the volume to fill the planes. And when you don't have volume to fill the planes, your decisions around where you send ATRs versus Q300s become very, very difficult. So there is sympathy for airlines about the difficulties they face, but also at the same time, regional and rural New Zealand expect to maintain connectivity to the rest of the country. Despite living in an online world, it is still very difficult to do business, to sell your goods, to encourage investment without having the physical presence on the ground. And so if we can't get that regional connectivity sorted in terms of its reliability, that's going to impact regions' ability to grow. And you've already seen that with some fears about different routes or different airlines pulling out of routes around the West Coast and around Westport and potentially up in the North Island too. So we're very much focused on that. And as I said a couple of months ago, we're looking at several options as to how the government can support regional connectivity, not necessarily airlines, but possibly airlines, but the connectivity piece is the important piece.
two other things which have come up in discussions with the sector. One is around an aviation strategy, and the other one is just how the Aviation Council is going in terms of adding value as a voice for the collective.
Yes, so by way of background, the previous government established the Interim Aviation Council to look at issues across the sector, and they have got a draft, I think, where are we, Keith? Draft decision for aviation, which is in process at the moment.
Yes, it's being worked through by the committee, by the council at the moment.
And the council is an interim body, and so we'll release that vision for aviation when it's finalised. I would be looking from that vision for it to be, it's going to be sort of introductory steps, but be focused on what are the actions that we can take as a sector to improve things like workforce recruitment and retention, regional connectivity, costs to consumers. Those are the kind of things, accessibility issues for maybe disabled passengers travelling on our routes. Those are the kind of things I would expect to actually produce some core actions on. And then if there appears to be significant value in that council, it's something that we could look at establishing permanently as a, as a sector approach to aviation, because At the moment, we don't quite have one, and there are various representative groups that exist around the sector, very strong advocates, but perhaps a more joined-up approach would be appropriate.
Okay, cool. I think Dan, you.
Yep. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Minister. Just turning our attention to Civil Aviation Authority, keen to get an understanding or an update from you around how the new refresh board's going. I know there's been some culture issues in the past. What's your, how's it all going at Civil Aviation?
I'll hand over to Mark to address in a second, but just at the outset, we have had a significant refresh of the board. I've been very impressed with the focus that they've taken on the governance and financial aspects of civil aviation, and I'm hopeful that the organisation as a whole is moving to a space where it is much more aware of the cost pressures that it faces, the changing regulatory environment in terms of also, international security requirements and the cost that puts on CAA, but also making sure that as a consumer and as levy payers that we get value for money. But perhaps I'll hand over to Mark to discuss some of the culture stuff as well.
Sure. Firstly, on the board, very happy with the way the board is working. That was refreshed in early August last year, and the board have worked their backsides off getting their head around it. 5 out of 7 were brand new, so it's quite a big gap to fill. That's been filled very quickly, and they've gone about their business very diligently and they work very hard. We've lost one of those board members through sickness, and currently recruiting for 2, which we hope to fill in the next 6 to 8 weeks.
Fantastic.
In terms of the culture, that was hitting the media through New Zealand Herald up until about Christmas, and you would have noticed there's been nothing for the last 6 months. So we've quite surgically gone into the organisation, worked out where the issues were, and largely sorted them out. And as at today, I think the authority's in good heart.
Yeah, fantastic.
Just been through a sort of restructure that's just settling down now.
Great.
Just recruiting 2 new DCEs, and then looking now to filling the director role by the end of this year with Keith's retirement.
Fantastic. And supplementary to that is around new technologies. I think last time you came before us, Mark, you talked about all the new tech and how is Civil Aviation Authority positioned to utilise that, adjust to new technology with AI and so forth? Or Minister, if you are able to.
Yeah, I can start and Keith can add, but certainly with the new screening technology we're using and the lane matrix screening is driving efficiencies. We're using LiDAR at the main airports now as well, in cooperation with the airports. We're already seeing an absence of queues compared to 6 to 8 months ago. And the metrics are looking very positive, and the costs are starting to come down. We're actually seeing meaningful efficiencies now coming through the last 3 or 4 months. So cost base is looking much better.
Just on the advanced aviation space, where a lot of the technology is coming through, the authority is doing a significant amount of work on the sort of new and complex application certifications that are coming through. And our office works very closely with Minister Collins and her space portfolio too, because there's sort of that overlap, that transitional overlap for advanced aviation. But it's an incredibly exciting sector. There are huge opportunities for us as an agricultural based economy for advancements in drone technology. If you think of the kind of applications where you can do spot spraying, or if you've got to want to do wilding pine control, and rather than sending a team to trek 10, 15 kilometres up through the backcountry, you can send a drone out to survey the area, identify the wilding pines, come back to base, reload, fill up some spray, take it out and spot spray those wilding pines, all without an operator having to move, 50, 100 metres. That's really exciting in terms of the kind of environmental conservation work we can do. And there's that entire area. So making sure we've got a good, flexible, proactive framework in place for that is key. And I'm fairly confident that the authority work very, very well in that area.
Awesome. And then one final question, if I can, Mr. Chair, is just around ensuring that what actions we're taking to ensure that the authority is, best in class. Are we benchmarking across the world? What can you tell us about, plans the government is taking to make sure it is a best-in-class organisation?
Yeah, well, I can provide one bit of feedback I had over the past week when I went down to, well, maybe I won't say the area because then that might identify the individual, but I was down in central Otago and they made the comment that our authority was much simpler and more straightforward to deal with than some of the other international authorities that they've had to deal with without wanting to name names. But Mark, do you want to comment on perhaps our international reputation in the upcoming audit in preparation for ICAO?
Yeah, I'll probably ask Keith to give you a summary on the audit, but one thing I will add is just in terms of the industry engagement, I think the board have now met with, since August, 80 industry organisations. So we are listening, taking a lot of feedback, making a lot of improvements, and feel the engagement's much, much higher. And internationally, we've got some firsts, particularly around some of our security work, but Keith can add to that.
Sure, thank you. From an international perspective, we're very well connected to particularly like Five Eyes countries and internationally more broadly, particularly with FAA, EASA, through the ICAO in the Pacific. We know from all of that engagement that we are really operating in the same challenging environment around emerging technology. And we are there or thereabouts in terms of providing in New Zealand with a flexible and performance-based regulatory framework that enables people to do emerging tech in New Zealand. And that's being enhanced as we speak in accordance with Minister Meager and Minister Collins around a new rule for advanced aviation experimental activity, looking at the rules that relate to drone use and looking to change the balance a bit between what you can do without being certified and having the cost of certification with what you need to be certified for. We know that all international authorities that we're connected with have the same challenges around certification processes, particularly around emerging tech, because there are no historic pathways for that kind of stuff. It's wrestling with novel technology that is integrated into complex airspace that is already very busy. In terms of aviation security, we are also very connected internationally. We're part of things like the International Aviation Authorities Group that is releasing guidance on how to develop new technologies. So we're very connected. We're certainly not behind in some areas. We're possibly leading in the way we think about and develop regulatory frameworks.
The basic question is really important because we need to have a rule set which encourages economic growth and encourages efficiency and simple, straightforward rulemaking and rulemaking which is flexible. But at the same time, we need to maintain high international standards around safety because our reputation as being a safe country to travel to is vitally important. We're in a competition for international tourists, international visitors. And so we need to make sure that we maintain that reputation of being a safe, secure country to travel to, as well as being easy to work with from a regulatory perspective.
Thank you. Thank you.
Which I think, I'm going to take Tangi because I know are you on maritime as well? You are, we'll go maritime. Good, right, okay, away we go. It's that time of maritime.
This committee is taking a bit of an interest in maritime, as you'll be aware, Minister. But one of the things that I really wanted to get a handle on what you're thinking in the future, for the next 12 months, especially around cruise ships. And every year, New Zealand's graced with a whole lot of people that come to enjoy our shores, bringing their cruise shipping. What is Maritime New Zealand doing to support and even grow that service?
Yeah, I'll invite Chris to swap with Keith, but I'll touch on, so the cruise industry is, it's incredibly important to our country. It's also important in terms of providing a reason for tourists to fly here. So it has that link in with aviation. It is on the decline in most of our ports. There is only one port which is increasing the number of cruise ships visiting next season, and that is Timaru, and that speaks for itself, right? But most of the other ports are facing a decline, and that's for a number of reasons. The three main reasons that the industry gives us is around the change in our rules and our mindset towards biofouling, the issuance of fees and the lead-in time for when we change our fees and to having to set its fees for its tickets. And then the issue around Milford Sound. Now, we've addressed Milford Sound last couple of weeks ago, where we have said that essentially Milford is open for tourism. That there was a previous view that cruise ships and tourist flights should not be frequenting themselves in and out of Milford. We don't agree with that view. We think we can make the appropriate investments into Milford Sound in order to attract those cruise ships, because essentially, as much as we all love our little regions, places like Te Anau and Milford Sound are the places that people really want to come and visit, so they are vital. In the biofouling space, we're working with Minister Hoggard and Minister Upston on what we can do to make sure that we maintain the security of our environment and our waters, but make sure our rules align with what the rest of the world is doing and make sure we don't go too far overboard so as to put those cruise ships off. And Kirsty, I'm not sure if you want to, anything else?
No, I would just reinforce that the work that we're doing, because it's a cross-agency solution, supporting ministers as part of working with tourism, MBI and others on those issues.
Yeah, I think the Selectmen inquiry will be really key to some of that, looking at what is the access like into our ports for cruise, some of the security issues around our ports, and ports productivity would be some good things for the committee to look into.
So supplementary on that, I mean, does Maritime New Zealand have a sufficient footprint around the country rather than just based in the main sectors that you feel that you can service places such as Tauranga that have cruise ships coming in and may have issues that they need sorted out, or even pleasure crafts going out, wanting to get out of New Zealand and get their registration or surveying or whatever it's called certificate so that they can actually leave New Zealand waters? Do you think Maritime New Zealand's got a footprint wide enough to actually cover New Zealand's requirements?
Yeah, so probably just to be really clear of Maritime's role with cruise ships, our role is to inspect cruise ships for safety and compliance with conventions. So we wouldn't be doing all of the other roles that you would imagine customs and MPI and things are doing on ports. In relation to certification, exactly like the Civil Aviation Authority, we run certification processes. We have 4 regional hubs and satellite offices across New Zealand, pretty much where all of the ports are, as well as a head office. So we have a broad footprint that enables us to do our role effectively.
Thank you. Why is the government happy to basically leave our most critical inter-island link exposed by not having specific provision for the actual procurement of an emergency tug or a contingency vessel in the budget?
That's not correct.
The procurement of the tug?
Well, there is, correct if I'm wrong, but there's provision in here for
So there are two.
critical response people.
There are 2 separate pieces of work that are addressing emergency towage. So there is already money that was given in budget last time that's paying for the MMA Vision, which is an emergency towage vessel that is in the Cook Strait 20 days roughly per month on scene, and then at the rest of the time up in New Plymouth. So that is there.
That's not on a permanent basis. That is not on a permanent basis.
No, it's not. It's on a temporary basis at the moment. And then there is a separate piece of work that Maritime New Zealand's doing with the Ministry of Transport that is looking at other solutions and willingness of pay.
I will clarify to the committee that this specific responsibility sits with Minister Bishop, so I'm wary of overstepping space.
All right, you can follow up in a written response.
Yeah, I think that'd be useful. I was going to ask the same question because that comes up regularly, and that will be picked up in the inquiry as well. Yeah, Julianne.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about the Chatham Islands shipping solution. Do you know when a new contract for the shipping service might be in place and when it might be operational?
So the latest update, I know we've had the request for proposal went out a few weeks, if not months ago. Those requests have come back. I think it's, where's MOT? Bruce might want to draw it up. I think I can say this, but we had about 9 proposals come in, and that we're going through a shortlisting process at the moment. That those shortlisted proposals will then go out to the local community for their input as well, because unlike a lot of these proposals, it is a lifeline for that community, so it's important that they have input into it too. And then I think we're expecting Cabinet to make some decisions around that. Again, I don't think I can put a specific time frame around it, but we would look to have contracts in place.
So there should be cabinet decisions within the next few months.
Yeah.
And then something operational from 2027.
Yeah.
The community engagement's underway now.
And there was additional funding provided for servicing of the Southern TRE in the interim, because there's obviously another year and a half at least.
Yeah.
So we continue to use that.
And if you think of the lead-in time from 2027, we would hope to have essentially proposals and contracts in place. I'd hope for the end of the year, but it will all depend on negotiations and what's actually being made available.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Okay. Tracy.
Yes, just two quick questions. First of all, Maritime New Zealand funding, insofar as is it sufficient to meet its responsibility for health and safety regulation at ports, given the increased activity in ports now? And secondly, I'll do both so that I'm just conscious of time. The $30 million Coastal Shipping Resilience Fund, can you give us a bit of a breakdown on how that's expected to benefit South Island routes, particularly Timaru, Littleton, Bluff?
Yeah, so on the first one around maritime being resourced for health and safety. So Maritime New Zealand are responsible for health and safety at all ports or most ports? All ports.
13 ports, yeah.
There is a challenge, there is probably going to be, you know, with the drop off in cruise ships, they bring substantial revenue into the country. That's one of the reasons why we want to encourage cruise into New Zealand. But from what I understand of in the numbers I've seen, I'm fairly confident that Maritime has the resources to fulfil its role in that space, and I think they would be correct.
Yeah, so when we got our extended designation on the ports in July last year, we got additional money through the Working Safer levy. That gets paid out when people pay alongside the ACC levy. That was enough to create an extra team of hazard specialists that are up and down the country that are carrying out our new designation. So we think we've got good expert people, and we're seeing quite a large number of both assessments and good work with the sector as a result of that funding.
The feedback's been
so going
very
forward,
positive.
given budget 25, that feels as if it's sufficient to see you through. Thank you.
And then on coastal shipping resilience fund that announced last week, $30 million fund, which had been previously signalled but open for applications last week. Now, there was a very similar fund 2 to 3 years ago. We've slightly changed direction. We want to be investing in long-term infrastructure or long-term investments that will improve coastal shipping resilience. One of the challenges for the last round of that funding was that it ended up going into essentially funding some services for a period of time. Once that funding ran out, the services disappeared. We want that kind of funding to go into either coastal infrastructure, or it could be into things like workforce training or workforce development to improve the long-term ability to attract seafarers and to attract people in the maritime industry. But the applications, all the criteria are online, I think.
So applications haven't closed?
No, they only opened last week.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and they're open for 6 to 8 weeks, actually.
Exactly how long, but the criteria on the ministry website.
Yeah, and we are looking for co-investment. So proposals that come forward with co-investment will, I think, be weighted more strongly. That just gives us better bang for our buck in terms of a funding pot.
So do you see that fund having a role in that sort of resilience, given any rail disruptions for the South Island that we've previously talked about? I should imagine.
Yes. Or coastal shipping.
Good use there.
Yeah, well, coastal shipping. I've got to be careful what hat I wear on, because I'm obviously very biased in terms of, you know, if I was king for a day, you know, Timaru might be the capital of the country, but let's not upset the Wellingtonians.
Temporarily.
But yeah, look, coastal shipping is really, really important as part of that wider freight logistics picture. Road, rail, air freight, coastal freight, all very, very important. And when you think of the shift internationally towards larger and larger vessels coming into our ports, they're going to be limited as to where they can stop off. And that's going to mean we need to look at more hub and spoke models, where you have large vessels coming into our larger ports and then coastal shipping, perhaps moving those goods and services to other ports. And a couple of weeks ago, we announced funding for inland rail-enabled port in Mosgiel, and there is an inland port in Ashburton as well. So trying to do as much as we can to get goods off the road and onto rail and into our ports. And I'm certainly optimistic around some investment potentially in and around you know, other parts of the South Island to make that picture more enabling as well. But that perhaps could be what some of that coastal resilience shipping funding could be for, not necessarily things that touch the water, but perhaps inland infrastructure, which would enable some of those goods to shift forward as well.
So when applications close, I can look forward to safe in the knowledge that the South Island won't miss out like it has done on land.
Well, fortunately, there is a strong advocate for the South Island.
Not
I'm
holding
sure-
you
I'm
to
sure
it,
that
just
So the Associate Minister of Transport will engage very closely with the Minister for the South Island in advocating for those projects, but that's joint decisions being made by other ministers. And I don't want to preempt, predetermine the outcome of any of those.
That's what I heard.
I'm sure those will be excellent conversations. So look, thank you all very much. Really appreciate that. We'll close that as this part of the hearing now. Thank you.
Thanks, Minister.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, team, we've got, till